Okay, let's dive into something quite unexpected today. Picture this. A real moment of high-stakes international drama. It's playing out right there in the U.S. Oval Office. South Africa's President Ramaphosa is involved. So naturally, you'd think the big story, the main impact, would be about global politics, right?
Yeah.
Maybe USA relations.
You absolutely would, yeah. I mean, the headlines, you'd expect them to focus outwards. Diplomacy, trade, that sort of thing, geopolitics.
But here's where it gets, well, genuinely fascinating based on the sources we're looking at. The most significant fallout, maybe even the surprising part, seems to have happened back home in South Africa.
Uh-huh.
These sources, they reveal this core tension that the moment really exposed and maybe amplified societal reactions playing out against, the really stark reality of extremely high crime rates there.
Yeah, so our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack what these specific sources are telling us
Ah.
about the event itself, how it echoed back in South Africa domestically, and, well, what the potential implications might actually be for the country, for its leadership.
Okay, so let's start right there with that domestic reaction, because that's where the sources find something pretty unexpected. You've got this background of just shocking levels of violent crime. It's the kind of daily reality you'd assume dominates public concern, right?
Absolutely, that's the context.
But then a huge wave of anger gets directed not at criminals, not really at the state's inability to stop crime, but towards a specific group, Afroforum.
And what's particularly insightful, according to the analysis in these sources, is how people are interpreting that anger. Professor Siffer, he's quoted in one piece, he suggests this reaction lets many South Africans, and this includes people who aren't even ANC supporters, point to certain people, certain groups, and basically say they are not for South Africa.
Hmm.
The sources seem to think this moment created a space for that kind of very clear us versus them thing in the public conversation.
That really adds layers, doesn't it? And speaking of layers, the sources also dig into the complexity around identity here.
Oh, definitely.
There's a point made by analysts like Mondley Pillay that when you talk about Africans speakers in South Africa, it's a deeply diverse group.
Yes, exactly.
He says a large number of African speakers are people of color.
Crucial point.
And Pillay's view, which the sources highlight, is that Afroforum, by framing their activism in such, well, racial terms.
They've actually dealt a severe blow to the cause of Afrikaners in South Africa by racializing it.
So it challenges that idea that one group can speak for a whole language community.
Precisely. It complicates that narrative. And the sources also give us the counter perspective from Afroforum itself about the incident.
Right, their side of the story.
Callie Creel, he was speaking on Newsroom Africa. It's cited in one article. He defended what the group did, specifically denied they were chanting genocidal calls.
Okay.
And he even sort of turned the tables, suggesting that if President Ramaphosa claimed the Americans didn't know what was happening in South Africa, given the U.S. Embassy, their intelligence people there, Creel suggested that could almost be seen as Ramaphosa insulting the U.S.
Wow, okay. So it just shows how differently the whole thing was seen, depending on your perspective.
Completely different lenses.
And that disconnect, that perception gap, it brings us back to President Ramaphosa, his central role. The sources, they place him at these, they call them key inflection points in South Africa's recent history.
Yeah, moments where a rupture has occurred.
Right.
And the country has basically had to change course, sometimes dramatically.
Right.
And what the analysis in these sources suggests is that Ramaphosa has this perceived ability, maybe almost unique, to read these moments so well, to understand what's really going on underneath and navigate through these big shifts.
Yeah. So this White House event, even if it didn't quite deliver the huge economic or diplomatic wins with the U.S. that maybe some hoped for, according to the analysis, it could yet mark a dramatic reset for Ramaphosa and the GU with the South African public.
The GNU, the Government of National Unity, that new coalition.
Exactly. So the sources are hinting this moment might have had these unintended domestic consequences, consequences that could actually reshape his relationship with voters, maybe shift the public mood.
So just think about that for a second. You have an event playing out on the world stage, seemingly about foreign policy, but it unexpectedly throws a spotlight onto these really deep domestic tensions.
Yeah.
Challenges how people think about identity and potentially shifts the political ground right under a leader's feet.
It really shows how linked the global and the local are. They're not separate boxes.
Well, not at all.
So as you think about all this, maybe ponder this question. Are these moments of really intense public drama, these tensions, especially when they get amplified globally like this one, are they sometimes necessary? like catalysts needed for real domestic political resets, maybe even wider societal change.
And following on from that, if they are sometimes necessary,
Yeah.
what does it actually take for a leader? What qualities do they need to not just survive those ruptures, but to navigate them effectively? Navigate them in a way that actually changes the course for a nation, something to think about.